You know, when a crisis hits, speed is absolutely everything. But what happens when one of the world's most important regional blocs, ASEAN, is built for unity, and not so much for speed? Well, today we're going to dive into a really clever proposal called the Musyawarah Plus framework, which is designed to fix that exact problem.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll break down the core problem, what's known as the unanimity trap. Then, we'll look at where it comes from, a tradition called the ASEAN way. After that, we'll introduce the solution, Musyawarah Plus. We'll get into its main idea, splitting issues into critical and operational, and finally, see how it promises to get things moving without splitting up the group.
All right, let's start with the central issue. ASEAN it's a massive economic and political bloc. We're talking about over 650 million people. But for all that power, it often just gets, stuck. Unable to act when it really counts.
And that leads to the big question, right? Why does this powerful group of 10 nations seem to freeze up at the exact moment when you need them to act fast? We've seen it happen during really urgent events that demand a strong, unified response.
And look, this isn't just some theoretical problem. This kind of decision-making paralysis has very real consequences. As this quote puts it, it has rendered ASEAN indecisive in the face of fast-moving crises. And in those situations, the stakes couldn't be higher.
So, to understand why this keeps happening, we've got to look at the very foundation of how ASEAN operates. It's a tradition known as the ASEAN way, and believe it or not, it's the root cause of all this gridlock.
At the very heart of it all is this concept, Musyawarah Mufakat. It's a beautiful idea, really. It means that decisions are made through deep, respectful consultation, that's the Musyawarah part, with the ultimate goal of reaching a unanimous consensus, or Mufakat. It's all about making sure every single member feels heard and that the group stays united.
But, and this is a big but, here's the catch. When you require 100% agreement from all 10 members, any single country can hit the brakes on a decision. It's basically a veto. And what happens then? Well, it often forces the entire group to settle for the weakest, most watered-down outcome that everyone can reluctantly agree on, what they call the lowest common denominator.
And this brings us to the proposed solution. It's not about throwing out the old way completely. Not at all. It's about evolving it for the world we live in now. So, let's introduce Musyawarah Plus.
The whole point of this new framework is to help ASEAN live up to its own ambitions. In fact, the bloc's own Vision 2045 statement calls for it to be more decisive, responsive, and timely. This is all about giving them the tools to actually do that.
So, how does it actually work? Well, the core idea is surprisingly simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. You basically split all decisions into two different buckets, and each bucket has its own set of rules.
Okay, so on one side, you have what are called critical issues. You can think of these as the huge foundational decisions that really define what the bloc is all about. For those, you still need absolute 100% unanimity. But on the other side, you've got operational issues. This is the practical day-to-day stuff, implementing things everyone's already agreed on in principle. And this is where a new, more flexible rule comes into play, qualified consensus.
To get more specific, critical issues would be things like, say, admitting a new country into the group, or making changes to the ASEAN Charter itself, anything touching on territorial integrity or the bloc's fundamental principles, the really, really big stuff. For these, unanimity is and should be non-negotiable.
But for those operational issues, things like deploying humanitarian aid, coordinating disaster response teams, or just hammering out the final details of an economic agreement, that's where the new, flexible rules would kick in to stop things from getting bogged down.
So what is this qualified consensus? It just means a decision doesn't need all 10 hands in the air anymore. It could pass with a supermajority, for example, if 7 out of the 10 members agree. Or, and this is really clever, it could use something called an ASEAN minus X formula. That's just a way to let a country or two sit out of an initiative without stopping everyone else from moving forward.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's great, but how do you actually do this without fracturing the group's precious unity? This is where the framework gets really smart.
It's all about something called the harmonization strategy. And here's the crucial part. It respects every member's comfort level. A country that isn't quite ready to take a certain step can choose to opt out for now. But what they can't do is block out the progress of the members who are ready to go.
I love this analogy. Think of it like a convoy of ships.
Under the old system, the entire fleet had to travel at the speed of the very slowest ship. This new framework allows the faster ships to move ahead, while the whole fleet is still sailing together in the same direction.
And here's one more way to think about it that just puts it perfectly. This framework allows everyone to stay together for the family photo, preserving that all-important political unity while still letting the actual machinery of the bloc move forward. It's really trying to give you the best of both worlds.
So the new process is actually pretty straightforward. You always start with consultation. You always try your absolute best to reach a full consensus. But if and only if you hit a deadlock on an operational issue, that's when you apply the plus to break the logjam and get things moving.
Which leaves us with this one big final question. In a world that is moving faster than ever, a world that demands decisive action, could this smart evolution of a long-standing tradition be the key to finally unlocking the full potential of this vital global bloc? It's definitely a powerful idea to think about.